Welcome to the Business Power Hour with Darren and the Music Man. Brought to you by Friend Entertainment USA, producing the best concerts for charities and corporations for over 30 years. And CBMS Consulting Services, control your business before it controls you. In association with Area 22 Productions, your multimedia streaming network. Now, here is Darren and the Music Man.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Business Power Hour with Darren and the Music Man. I'm Darren Sayafi. I'm your host tonight. Norman's still out sick. He'll hopefully be back next week, so we're keeping our fingers crossed. He's doing well. But tonight is charity night. As you guys know, we started this last month. The last Wednesday of the month, we're going to be bringing charities on to talk about their causes and how we can help them. So tonight I have a very special guest. Her name is Eileen Corina. Oh, I said that correctly, right? She's a nationally recognized advocate and community health speaker for patient safety. Right? She is the president and founder of Pulse CPSEA, formerly Pulse of New York. Welcome, Eileen. How are you this evening?
Thank you. Very well.
So tell us about Pulse. What is Pulse all about?
Well, the CPSEA is Pulse Center for Patient Safety, Education, and Advocacy. And
so now I know why you made the acronym. Because saying that three
Pulse
times
Center
fast.
for Patient Safety, we can call it.
Okay.
And what very specifically what we do is we do community education about patient safety.
Okay.
So what the healthcare professionals and the people who work in hospitals know about patient safety, we teach the public about. Medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the country, and the public doesn't always know what they could do to improve their outcomes.
Okay, so if I'm a patient, and I remember as a kid, whenever I went to the doctor, basically what the doctor said was gospel. And you didn't really question it, and I'm seeing more and more that, especially I'm assuming what your organization does is, yes, we need to question the doctors and we need to question what they're doing to make sure they're doing the right things. Now, they're paid professionals. Why is it that you have a job if we have paid professionals who are supposed to be doing this? What are the hospitals not doing that we have to have people like you help us?
Well, healthcare professionals are trained in a certain way to understand that when something is bothering a patient or there's an injury or there's a diagnosis, that's what they act on. And sometimes they're wrong. We're not saying that they're bad people. We're saying that, like any other profession, mistakes are made. And they're not going to always know that mistakes are made unless the patient can speak up and talk about what kind of mistakes are being made or how we can help improve those outcomes. Healthcare professionals I don't want to say they never want to make mistakes, because we keep finding criminals in every profession.
Right.
But the fact is that they're not always right. They don't always get the diagnosis right. People make mistakes, medications. The same reason we put on our seatbelt in a car, not because I'm a bad driver or somebody's a bad driver, because something may go wrong. Somebody may look away. And that's how things go wrong. We talk about hand washing. It's such a minor thing to be talking about. Healthcare professionals should be washing their hands, but infections are rampant in hospitals. People are dying and suffering from hospital-acquired infections by the thousands, and it's been proven that hand washing, real careful hand washing in hospitals, reduce infections. And if that's the case, then why aren't all healthcare professionals washing their hands? Because they forget, and we need to remind them.
Okay, so recently I was up at the hospital actually visiting Norm, and one of the things I did notice was outside every room, the entrance to every room was that hand sanitizer stuff. And I noticed everybody that went in there hit that hand sanitizer, and they were just wiping their hands. All the nurses and doctors and people that were just coming into the room. So I mean, is that stuff that if we don't see them do it, is it okay to say, hey, you didn't wash your hands?
Well, what I believe, first of all, they do it outside the room, and then they open the door, and then they touch a notebook, or they touch the table, they touch the side of the bed that you might have touched, or other people came in and touched, or they touch other things. They really need to do it right before they touch the patient too. So it's not, and plus the hand sanitizer doesn't always kill all the germs. It doesn't kill things like the C. diff infection. That needs to be soap and water. It needs to wash away the spores. So there's a lot more to it than somebody hitting the antibacterial lotion on the outside and then coming into the room.
Right.
Should we? Yes, we should be asking them to do it. And as a courtesy, how do we do that? We teach people to ask, look, I'm sure you did it already, but I'd feel better if you'd wash your hands again before.
So how do you get clients? How do you, I mean, is it, I don't want to use the term ambulance chaser, but I mean, say something happened to me and I'm in the hospital and I don't know anything about what I should be doing or shouldn't be doing or what they should be doing. I mean, how do you come across your clients?
Well, first of all, when we're acting as advocates, we don't charge.
Right.
There's never a charge for our advocacy services. And that's because I don't ever want to put a price or a burden on anyone who's already going through the healthcare system. Mm-hmm. So we do that through, we raise the money through fundraisers and donations and small grants to do our work. And we do have pay for programs. But to get clients or get people, we only look for safety issues. So if you're in the hospital and you don't know what's happening, we'll encourage you to speak to the social worker, case manager, patient advocate within the hospital.
So how do you find me, though?
We don't find you, you find us.
You find us,
We don't
okay.
have to-
So
yeah,
I'm
we're found.
Right, so really what you're saying is if you have some issues or you think you're going to be going to the hospital, you know somebody in the hospital that is, and you're not really sure what's going on, and every time you go to the hospital, you're sitting there going, I don't know if really what's happening. You want people to reach out to you.
Right, and we'll work with families. Our work is called family-centered patient advocacy because a mother or a wife or a husband could be too close to the patient to really be their advocate. They could be too emotionally charged, also vulnerable or scared, and not know what to do. And even when I was an advocate for a dear friend, because I was too close, I called somebody that took our training and said, what am I missing here? What am I forgetting? And he came in and sat down. And
so if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, right, and needed your services, how would they do that?
They can call us at 516-579-4711. Our website is pulsecenterforpatientsafety.org. And my email, or you can email us at info@pulsecenterforpatientsafety.org. And we're on Facebook too.
You're on Facebook too.
We're Pulse Center for Patient Safety is a Facebook page. Yeah.
Okay, and we're going to share that Facebook page on our the Business Power Hour Facebook page. Okay, so
Great.
we'll get it out to everybody. So again, that phone number is
516-579-4711. And if there's an urgency, it goes to my cell phone. You could find me. We'll get somebody to call you back.
okay. Fantastic. So let me ask you this. I'm sure you're a busy organization. You have a lot of people that you attend to, and I noticed from your website that you do have a lot of volunteers. And I saw there's committees. So what do your committees do?
Well, we have groups of people, or people who help us. It's not a lot. I never want to say we have too many. We always need more volunteers and more people. So one of our committees that I'm very fond of is our Professionals for Patient Safety, PPS. And they're a group, we started that in 2014, of healthcare professionals, community members, family caregivers who meet once a month in Freeport. We meet at an very informal setting at a diner for dinner, and we talk about patient safety. So people who work in the hospital or healthcare setting and really don't know who they can go to for advice or information or just sharing can come to these meetings and talk about patient safety and their experiences. It could be, and it's a little structured because we always encourage people to share what they want. We're not allowed to ask them questions. We can't pry into deeper questions, and we can't give advice unless they ask for advice. So somebody can come and just share what they want to share and then stop it there, but then they could say, I need some advice.
Is that because of HIPAA laws and things
No,
like
it's
that?
no, it's strictly because of privacy, and that's HIPAA is one of the things I'd like hospitals to get rid of that term because HIPAA and privacy are similar, but people understand privacy. And if you tell me that you don't want to talk to me because of HIPAA, I'm going to say, show me where it says that, because it doesn't. It does say that the patient deserves their privacy. We need to give them their privacy.
Right, okay.
HIPAA is very different than what people make it into.
Right, and well, that's a term that you hear people throwing around all the time
Sure.
when you're talking about healthcare and how that works and all that stuff. So to be part of your organization, right, to come and volunteer, because, you know, as we know, every charity is always looking for additional volunteers. What are the requirements? What do I, you know, what skills do I need in order to come and help you?
Well, we do an orientation, which is fairly new. If you want to, we have a couple of different programs that present patient safety information.
Okay.
So we want people to be out there speaking. We're actually doing this around the country, encouraging people to become facilitators for workshops and community groups. We do an orientation. There's forms to fill out. We have a disclaimers and privacy information that we ask people to fill out and to learn how to run and facilitate our groups and our presentations.
Okay, so these healthcare, people that are in the healthcare field that join
It could be
your organization?
anybody.
It could be
If
anybody.
people are in the healthcare field, we ask them, and we do have an all-day training. We have a 9-hour training that's done over 2 days or 3 days. We're always looking for hosts and people to come to that.
Right.
It is an advocacy training, and when people get that training, they can become advocates. We give them a certificate. They can become patient safety advocates. They could shadow me in the hospital, or when I go see clients, I'll shadow them until they can get paid for it if they want to get paid for it. We encourage people to do this as a career.
Okay.
Because if we're not getting paid for it, we might see somebody once or twice, and then they have to find somebody.
Right.
We need those people for them to find.
So
as
it's actually a
advocates.
paid type of position that you're actually giving that service for free,
Yes.
and there are people that are actually being paid to do that.
Yeah, there are patient advocates around the country, a few on Long Island, people who do this. They get paid fairly well because it's not a huge business.
Right.
And they do different things. So ours is not necessarily where we will monitor somebody in the hospital or be with them or go with them on doctor's visits.
Right.
Some are billing advocates. There's a lot of different kinds of patient advocates.
So an advocate could really encompass pretty much everything. So if you have billing issues, you can get an advocate for that. If you need somebody to go to the doctor to explain things and make sure that the doctor is explaining the proper things to you, you have an advocate for that, right? So there's pretty much, I mean, it's a big field then.
It's a very big field, and we're hoping that it grows. We want it to grow.
Right.
Our goal is that nobody should be in the hospital alone. A lot of the things that we can do, again, we could do over the phone. I could work with family members as they are with somebody in the hospital if they don't understand what's happening. But our goal is not to explain what the doctor or nurse is saying. So if somebody comes to our organization and is trained by Pulse, they're not using their clinical skills if they are a nurse or doctor.
Okay.
They're learning communication. They're learning to navigate the healthcare system. It's mostly relationship building between the patient, the family, and the healthcare team.
Okay.
That's what they're learning because...
So they're the bridge.
Right, exactly.
They create the bridge between the doctor.
Exactly.
Because sometimes a doctor or a nurse or whatever will come in, and the way they speak... Sometimes, you know, I mean, with some of the words that these guys use and ladies use, is they're a little overwhelming.
Right.
It could be very overwhelming, especially if you're in a very stressful situation where you have a spouse or a child or very sick, and you don't know what's going on, and they're throwing all kinds of words at you. You know, I guess you become that bridge to say, hey, well, time out. You know, let's slow it down.
Exactly.
Let's explain it a little bit differently because they're not quite understanding what you're talking about.
Right,
Type of stuff,
and there
right?
is something called teach back, where the healthcare professionals are expected to ask the patient, "What did you hear me say?"
Right.
So they repeat it back what they heard. An advocate who's working with them can also encourage that. Could you tell the doctor what you heard them say? I shouldn't be doing as their advocate because it doesn't matter if I understand it. I have to make sure that they understand it, and I'll be
Right.
there taking notes. You know, making sure that we're getting it right.
Okay, all right, that's fantastic. Now, if I want to help your organization, but I'm a little weary about going, and meeting with patients and things like that. Are there other things that I could do to help your organization?
Well, it depends how deep your pockets are. We always need money.
Well, yeah, we
I'm
know
not
that.
proud.
But say we have people that really want to help you.
Yeah.
They're nervous about being patient advocates,
Sure,
so to
sure.
speak. Is there administrative stuff, things like that?
There's
they
a
can
lot
help
of
with?
things there's a lot of things people could do. They could be out there representing us with the work that we're doing. That's always helpful. letting people know about our work. We do
Right.
events. We had somebody run one of our
What kind of events do you do?
well, one of our board members just ran a Zumba class and raised a lot of money.
Zumba class.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So you did a fundraiser with the
yeah,
Zumba class.
And we have
That's
a fundraiser coming up April 23rd at the Brokerage Comedy Club.
September 23rd.
Yeah, what did I say? September 23rd.
As you said, April 23rd.
Yeah, no, September 23rd. Because we have another one April 12th. We have
Right,
another event
okay.
April 12th. So September 23rd. It's all on our website. And patient safety
And that
events,
website is?
Pulse Center for Patient Safety.org.
Okay, so
yeah.
if you want more information, you want to help out this organization, you said it was at, the fundraiser is going to be?
It's going to be at the Brokerage in Belmore.
The Brokerage at Belmore.
On September 23rd.
It's a comedy night?
It's actually not comedy. We have Toby Walker, who's
okay.
coming to do, he does jazz, and he's an international award-winning blues artist, so we're really excited.
So if you
I go way
like
back.
jazz and blues, come out September 23rd, support this organization, and really show that, give it the strength that we can.
Yeah, and doing fundraisers are actually really important for us because the work that we do is kind of doom and gloom. It's
Right.
not fun and fuzzy. So when we do fundraisers, we always hope to attract different people to learn about what we do.
Right.
And in every crowd, there's people that have had experience that say, I wish I knew about your services.
Well, I mean, and I was going to ask you, do you have any horror stories where they didn't, people didn't have an advocate and you kind of came in and, I wouldn't say saved the day, but because of your involvement, it turned out a lot better than it.
Well, there's a lot of stories like that, and what's very difficult about what we do is to get to do research and funding and get funding and measure our outcomes. It's really hard to measure what goes right. So if 1,000 people die or 400,000 people die a year from
Right.
hospital, medical errors, that's measurable. What's not measurable is how many people survive because they intervened or they saved themselves because they weren't supposed to die anyways.
Right.
So yes, there's been plenty of times where I was sitting at one time sitting at a patient's bedside where they called, the nurse was saying something to the patient next to her using the patient I was with, her name, and was going to give her medication, the wrong medication. And I intervened and said, excuse me, are you calling? And I straightened that out. But I'll never know if they would have actually ever given the wrong patient the medication.
Right.
But that could have been a very, very serious effect. I actually, in that case, I couldn't even believe what I was watching. I said, I can't believe this is happening right in front of me. So there's my own experience when I had surgery. My advocate said, you've got to tell them what you know because they're going to hurt you.
Right.
And I said, nope, I'm going to be a real bird's eye view. And then I wrote a 2-page letter to the hospital about what I witnessed as I was the patient, things that were said, behaviors. They made it very difficult to be a patient because I was a bother. Some of the nurses, now they could be overtired, stressed, overburdened.
So basically, the work atmosphere was not good
In
at
that
that
case,
particular
yes.
hospital.
in that particular hallway.
In that particular
I can't
hallway,
even say the hospital, in that
right?
hallway.
And as we know, as people that run organizations, that's a leadership issue.
Well, I'd like to think, what I like to say is the people at the top don't know what's going on at the bedside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem because they could say, we do this, all this wonderful work. We communicate, everything we do wonderful. But if you're not sitting at that bedside, and I've said to many people in leadership, take off your jacket and tie and go sit at
Get
the
out of the
patient.
ivory tower, come down here, roll up your sleeves,
Sit at
and
the
see
patient,
what's going on.
see what happens.
Yeah.
And actually, when I do check in on patients, because I do want to, if there is a problem, and I do want to, I just bring a book and sit and watch the behavior and keep the patient company. I don't have to be entertained. An advocate doesn't have to be entertained at the bedside.
Right.
So if I go in, I'm bringing a book, I'm bringing my phone, whatever it is, and I need to sit and observe.
So you don't really need entertainment or anything like
No,
that.
no, I could stand in one spot for hours.
So
I
you're that
learned
fly
to-
on the wall,
I am
right?
literally,
You're
yeah.
literally that fly
Yeah.
on the wall.
Yes.
And then you come back. Now, if you see behavior like that, how do you try to correct it?
Well, immediate correction is a relationship with the staff. And I never, and what we teach is, I don't call myself an advocate. I'm a friend of the family, friend of the patient. Because if I come in, if they could figure it out fast enough that I'm there with probably a little more skills. But if I come in and say that I'm an advocate, now they have another person that they have to deal with. Nobody really wants that.
Right away,
And
they put the wall up. You got
Exactly.
that wall of, oh,
Exactly.
she's out there to try to catch us doing something wrong.
Right,
So let's,
right.
yeah.
And that's from years of experience. So everything that I've done, I have way over 1,000 hours at the bedside. I mean, 1,000 hours I hit 5 years ago as a patient advocate. So everything I do and I teach and I practice are things that have worked, behaviors that have changed behaviors. So I like to call it, we're not aggressive, we're assertive, but very respectful.
Right.
And if I treat a nurse or healthcare professional with respect, then usually we get what we need.
Right.
They sometimes they just have to be snapped back into reality why they're doing their job.
Why they're doing what they're doing, right? And sometimes people get caught into the grind of life.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, I just don't want to go to work today. I don't want to be here. We all have those days, right? Where we don't want to be there. So you're kind of there and you're kind of saying, hey, let's try to get you back on the right track before you need to escalate it. And then if you need to escalate, you'll escalate it from there. And that's a great way to go because you're making that friendship right at that level that you're going to have to interface at all times, right? So it looks like in doing my research, of your organization today, because, like I said, you saw, I went on your website and I printed out a whole bunch of stuff and I was looking at, the committees that you have, and there's a fundraising and special events committee, professional, for patient safety, which is what we were just talking about, right? But you have some other projects too, right? The healthcare quality project. Tell us about that. And
Well,
what that's all
healthcare
about.
quality project I'm very excited about because I received a full scholarship from the National Patient Safety Foundation, American Hospital Association, to be trained for a year in patient safety.
Okay.
And I became a fellow for a year, and I had to bring what they called an action learning project to this training. So I was only the second non-medical professional to go, to be part of this, the first Long Islander to be accepted, and it was a real honor to be part of this. My project was that I wanted to meet with groups of people and find out from them what it's like to be them and what are their obstacles to getting safe quality care. What is it about safety that affects them? So I presented this project. It was approved. I actually got funding from Northwell Health for years on this and some grant money, foundation money for this because I needed my travel expenses paid to get to this and then to do this project. And we were actually did this for 5 years. So some of the groups we worked with, the first time we did this, 13 groups came together, people with HIV, the transgender community, young mothers young mothers, unwed mothers. We work with teenagers, 13 groups of people, hospice workers, and found out what it is about them. And then for a year, I worked on a project. I met with the people.
So with each group, you really dug into the things that they were encountering and the challenges that they were up against.
Yes.
With healthcare.
Yes,
right?
and we did a full year report on this.
Right. Okay.
And then, and now we're still doing it. So we come back with projects and programs and material that helps them or helps the healthcare professional work with this group of people.
Okay.
So people with Alzheimer's or people with disabilities, people who are in wheelchairs. I thought that somebody in a wheelchair would be afraid of falling in the hospital. That would be their obstacle because falls is a big problem.
Right.
No, their fear was that they would lose their equipment in the hospital. So a local hospital did some work on changing policy to make sure that their equipment had a sticker on it, that they had parking spots, all the things that they requested.
So I guess people who are wheelchair bound, right? And that's what we're talking about.
Right, in this case.
They have their own wheelchairs. They have a lot. So they're worried, and I can understand that. They go into the hospital, where's my wheelchair?
Right.
Somebody could take it and go down the hall, and
Exactly.
all of a sudden it disappears. And, they got a fancy customized wheelchair with,
right, and that's
all
very
the bells and
distracting.
whistles.
It's very distracting. Somebody who goes to the hospital and becomes a safety issue because now they don't want to go. There's lack of trust.
Right.
So there's things that come up with different groups that we look at and what are their obstacles, and we're still doing it. We just finished a grant with day laborers.
So if you see, you see one of these groups, you see the challenges that they come up against. I mean, you said Northwell was part of this. So would you now go back to Northwell and saying, hey, look, for this particular group, these are the things that they're up against. What are your policies on this? Like, for example, the wheelchair people, that are bound to wheelchairs. What's the policy? And
Well, we shared the information
Right.
and the project with them. What they do with it is really, because our goal is never to change a hospital's policy.
Right.
That's not our goal. Our goal is to change the patient and family's behavior.
I gotcha.
So we can't make a hospital do. They have all the
Yeah.
everything to do. We don't have. We need to know what we can do. So if patients who are in wheelchairs know that they're not alone and they're not the only ones that are afraid of losing their wheelchair or their cushion on their wheelchair or their walkers, then they know enough to speak up because
Right.
it's not just them, and it empowers patients to feel more part of that team to speak up at what they need. So each of these groups found ways of speaking up and recognizing that their needs need to be met.
So, and not to again, privacy is a thing, but what was one of the most unique stories in your research during this project that you found that was very surprising to you?
Well, everything I went in with a clean slate. I did not know, like for people with HIV, I didn't realize that the stigma of having HIV, or AIDS, anybody knows their medication will know that they have AIDS. So even in a hospital room, they don't want other people to know about their medication. So it's a stigma about the medication. People who are transgender have a lot of issues that are very unique to them, but things that we can go across the board. So we do some training in we call it the elephant in the room, dispelling the myth of being transgender. As a not transgender person, I could speak to people who, because I was one of those people who believed things wrong.
Right.
And I didn't understand it. Now I do. That just calling somebody by the wrong name. So if there's a woman whose name is a male name legally, and she's waiting in a doctor's office and is called a male name, she may walk out of the room and never go back to the doctor because she doesn't want to be called a male name.
Yeah, I see.
So
You see that now. Where the transgenders are, and you, like you said, it could be a woman, a guy, Joe, and now they want to be called Paula. And
Right.
if you call them Joe, they want they won't acknowledge it. They just no, I'm Paula, and that's it.
And you know what we learned from that I think is the best is that everybody deserves to be called what they want to be called.
Right.
If I want to be called Miss Karina and not be called Eileen, or if I want to be called Mary, why can't I be called Mary?
Right.
So it really goes across the board. We learned that the modesty. You go in to get an EKG, you're told to take off your shirt. What if you are modest?
Right.
So we learned that from the transgender community, but.
And there are a
Everybody
lot of
deserves-
people that are uncomfortable in those situations.
Yeah, so why
you
shouldn't
know?
everybody be offered a gown?
Right.
Male or female, or it doesn't matter. So the things that we learn across the board, the stigma of having HIV and knowing the medication. Well, I don't want anybody to know my medication. It's nobody's business if I'm on high blood pressure medication or diet pills, or why should anybody know my business? So it really is across the board. Is what I found is very exciting. To learn that there's so many similarities within our differences.
So, and that's a great point, right? Is that when you're working with your clients, do you get them to realize that they're not unique in the things that they're going through? It's one of the things you and I spoke earlier, and you asked me what I do, and I said, and I told you I do business coaching for small businesses and that. And one of the things that I always try to stress as my coaches are telling me their problem, or my clients are telling me their problems and the things that they're going through, I sit back and I take it in and I understand it and I'm sympathetic to it, but I also let them know that they're not the only ones. It's kind of like that thing where, something happened to you traumatic, and then you go to a support group and you realize there are a whole bunch of other people that basically the same things are happening to, and you're not alone. Is that a big part of your advocacy program?
The reason it sort of is, there's a piece to that that's not true. Because if somebody shares that they're hospitalized and they're really scared because they're hospitalized, one of the things that we teach somebody to as an advocate to do is to find out what's really going on. So you could tell me, I'm not taking this medication. I'm just not taking this medication because I don't want to take this medication. And I might say, as your friend or family member, I might say, oh my God, just take it. What's the big deal? Just take it. It'll make you better. You'll be fine. But I'm going to find out why you don't want to take that medication. There's a history there.
Oh yeah,
that I'm
and
going to find.
I'm
So
not saying
that's what
that,
makes.
yeah.
But that's what makes every case unique. So yeah, a lot of people don't want to take the medication. A lot of people have had cancer. A lot of people are afraid of their heart attack. But I don't know what's going on in your life. So, and that's one of the things that are very important, because when I have a patient that's screaming, she wants to get out of the room, she wants to go home, go home, go home. I was promised I'd go home at noon, and now it's 3 o'clock. And I find out, tell me why you want to go home. What's going on? Well, I got to get my kid off the bus. Well,
Yeah.
let's make a phone call and get your kid off the bus. That's a true story.
Right.
That changed everything. It was not about going home. So the same thing going back to hand washing. It's not about the hand washing. It's more about the respect, the trust, the fear of infection. There's a whole story around that incident of washing hands that we're not focusing on because we're so focused on the outside or the shell of what people are saying,
Right.
instead of what's really at the root of the problem,
Right.
the situation.
Right, and that's it, and that's what we find, right? And we got to dig that out of them, and sometimes that takes a little bit of work because people aren't always forthcoming. Because again, it goes back to they think that they're the only one
Right.
that are going through, and you are not going to understand why they're freaking out the way that they're freaking out, and it's a tough nut to gain somebody's trust and to make that connection. And you got to make that fairly quickly too,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, I mean, people typically, especially in this day and age, the hospitals are just, you're here, you're gone. They want to get you out the door as fast as they can get you out the door. They don't want you hanging around, 25, 30 years ago, it was like you go into the hospital, you'd have a kid and you were in the hospital for 3 days.
Right.
Now it's you have a kid and a day and a half later, you're out,
Right.
and you're gone. They don't want you in the hospital anymore. So that's a tough nut too. How do you prepare your people and work with your people to teach them how to make that connection very quickly?
Well, it's all part of the training, and that's why it's 9 hours and more than an hour. It actually, and that's the other reason we don't do it online. We don't do webinars. Our training is face-to-face because we have to have those experiences. We have to, face when
It's
somebody.
about the human connection, right?
It's the human connection.
And that's really what builds the trust.
Yes.
Doing it over a computer is not going to build the trust.
Exactly,
Watching
right.
this show, and I know everybody loves me and everybody wants, and everybody trusts me from watching this show, but you're not going to create that connection with me unless you're sitting next to me.
Right.
Right? And we're talking here, and you and I are creating a connection between by sharing your stories, right?
Right.
And talking back and forth. So, I mean, this is all really fantastic stuff. So how do people get in touch with you? All right.
You can call me at 516-579-4711 or online. You can info@pulsecenterforpatientsafety.org and sign up for our newsletter. All our events go out once a month in our newsletter, and on our website we have a newsletter that, if you scroll down, it says under news and events, you could sign up for our newsletter and get information, and all our past newsletters are on there also. So I hope people will sign up for that so you can keep updated on our programs.
And I want to, we're on Facebook Live and we're on Twitch, okay? And I just want to shout out to Brian. Brian, thanks for being on. I know Brian because you and I are both members of the Long Island Speakers Bureau.
Yes.
So there's our shout out to the Long Island Speakers Bureau, Brian. And my cousin John, who is faithful and always on. Hi, John. Okay, I'm rubbing my nose, so I do see you. You are online tonight, buddy. And I want to thank everybody for watching and what's going on. So we have all of this great stuff going on, and to me, I have a brother who has cerebral palsy, so he's in and out of the hospitals constantly, and I've had these type of experiences where we've been in there and we're saying this isn't right, and we've questioned it, and there's 5 of us total boys,
Wow.
all right, and my mom and dad have passed, so we watch out for him, and I have one brother that's got his health proxy and things like that. So we're always dealing with these type of things. And even in his out of hospital care, we're always looking for what's other ways that we can make it better. Because sometimes we feel, like you were saying, sometimes the staff just doesn't care. And I understand it's.
I say they act like they don't care.
They act like they, right. So, but what I'm saying is, from my experience, I have felt like the staff just didn't care.
Right.
All right. And it was very frustrating because I'm sitting there going, wait a second, you're getting paid to care. But what we don't realize is that they're human too.
Right.
And they're in a job, and we don't know how long their shift has been, and we don't know what's going on in their personal lives and what they're bringing to work. So we have to be more open to those things also, correct?
Yeah, and a couple of tips I can give you for that I like carrying Twizzlers and lollipops and give them to the nice nurses. And it usually breaks the tension.
It breaks the tension.
If they wash their hands, I'll give you a Twizzler, breaks the tension, and they say, I'll wash my hands. Everybody loves a Twizzler.
It's almost like the Pavlov type thing.
I always carry, I have them in my bag now.
Okay.
I always carry Twizzlers.
So if I wash my hands, I can get a Twizzler?
I'll give you Twizzlers before I go, yeah. It breaks the tension. It reminds them, snaps them back to humanity.
Right.
That we've just brought them back to, a smile and something a little lighter. Yeah. I also encourage people to bring candy and donuts and junk. Most people leave it at the nurse's station.
Right.
I leave it in the patient's room because then you have the nurses and aides coming into the room to get the candy that they don't want because they're all on a diet.
Right.
But they'll stand there with the Russell Stover picking out what they want.
Right.
And it works 100% of the time. So leaving things for the nurses, get little gifts. It sounds petty, and some people might say you're crazy. They don't deserve it. But the fact is that they do work hard, and it breaks the tension.
And I'm not trying to stand on a soapbox or anything, but our society's coming, like when we were younger, that was a common, you always, like tips, things like that. What we're finding now is more people are, well, tips part of my pay. And they don't realize tips is for exceptional service.
Right.
It's for going, over and above. So if I don't tip you very well, that means you didn't get you didn't do your job the way it should be done. And when I always get really good service, I always tip very well because of that, because it becomes an expectation now. And what we've lost, because it was the old thing, whenever you went to somebody's house, you always brought something. Right? You don't really see that as much anymore. When people come over and that, it's like our generations, we still do that
we're in
stuff.
the middle, yeah.
But the younger generations are not really doing that. And like you said, it's making that connection. It's doing a little something that people are going, hey, they're really thinking about us. It's just not about them.
You could buy $1 lottery tickets for $20 and hand somebody a $1 lottery ticket and really make their day.
Yeah.
So you're only giving them $1.
Right.
And it could really make somebody very happy. It is a connection. Some people, again, people say, I'm not doing that. That's fine. But for some people, it's worth it because for me, it's worth it. Well, I want to make sure my family members are
That's actually a tool to, like you said, to make that connection, right? Something in common. You like candy, you like donuts, those type of things. Let's get somewhere in common because that's where the trust builds.
Right. And I just recently had an experience with a surgeon when I asked him to wash his hands before touching the patient. He said, I did already. And I said, well, I didn't see you, and I'll give you a Twizzler if you do. Right. And he said, okay. That's not the type of thing you want to do with a surgeon who's just spent all night doing surgery, but, I'm asking you to do it. And he said, fine. And again, it's explaining that it's for me to see. And of course, I go to the patient first and ask them if it's okay for me to do that, because if a patient said, oh my God, I can't believe you did that, that's up to them if they want that service.
You're right. Now you're creating a block between you and the patient.
It could be, right. Everything gets done is done for the patient. It's about the patient. It's not about me.
So it's really, and that's the thing, right? That's the best part of giving. When you're giving, and really the definition of giving is giving something with no expectation of getting anything in return.
Right.
Right? So if we're doing something for a patient, we shouldn't expect the patient to be sitting there going, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, although it's nice, and we appreciate that. But at the same time, we're doing it for them. We're not doing it for ourselves, and we're not doing it to fill our egos, so to speak.
Right. Well, a little bit twist there. If every patient speaks up and has a family member at their bedside, it's going to be better for me.
Right.
It's going to be better for you. So it's a little bit self-centered because it may not be in my lifetime though, but it may be in my children's lifetime that healthcare will be more patient-centered and patients will be more part of the team than they are now.
Right. Yeah, because it goes back to, when we were kids, it was the doctor came in, a doctor said this, that's what you did. There was no questioning.
And we go to
anything
high
that's going on.
schools. My favorite thing is really going to high schools' health classes and
So
talking to
that was
kids.
my thing is, I know you're a speaker, and I understand that when you go and speak, you do it a little bit differently than most speakers. When I go and speak, I get up in front of the room, I speak, for a half an hour, 20, half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever it is, then I do a Q&A type thing. But from what I understand, you do it completely different.
I do it a little different. It's I want to hear from the people, and I want people in the room to learn from each other. So my speaking is very often more facilitating a presentation and a discussion. So it's not 100%, everybody talking. There is lecture and there is speaking. But I want to bring back each time. I'm doing this for 20 years. And if I'm going to bore myself to death if I'm just going to keep saying the same thing over and over.
Right.
So every time I do a presentation, first of all, I start it with who likes their doctor. And that I've been doing since 1996, who likes their doctor. And then finding out why people do and why they don't. Because if you don't like your doctor, there's somebody in that room that's going to recommend somebody.
Right.
Why would you be going? Because I never thought of not going because I've been going to them for 20 years.
It's almost like, well, it's a doctor. I don't have to like them. They know what they're doing.
Exactly.
But people don't get the fact that just like, why do you go to your barber? Why do you go to your hairstylist? Why do you go to your mechanic? Because you trust them.
Right.
And people interact or do business with people because of who they are, not what they do necessarily. And sometimes we forget that with some of the things that we're doing. So that's fantastic that you do it like that.
Yeah,
So,
in everything we talk about, there's always a discussion because it's fun. I mean, patient safety is not a fun topic, but we make it fun in our discussions about what we do.
So give me an example of something that would be funny.
I'll give you a good example.
Right.
I don't know how far I want to go. So, well, because this is, you want me to tell you about the stars?
Absolutely.
All right,
Think
so
about
this
tell me
came
about the stars.
STARS.
Right.
Came from working with people with lupus.
All right.
So people with lupus said that they keep getting misdiagnosed. The doctors don't understand their symptoms. They just, and I said, well, explain. Let's talk about what you're saying. I'm exhausted. Everything hurts. This is what they were saying. So he said, well, what about a doctor that just worked 20 hours and has 3 children and has to make dinner now? Why aren't they exhausted? We have to figure out what are you saying or how to say it.
Right.
So we have here stars, and I'll just read it down. Specifics, treatment, associated symptoms, relieve and provoke the symptoms, and severity.
Okay.
So the specifics is where's the pain, and what were you doing before the pain started?
Don't make a generality.
Right.
Tell me
Tell me
specifically.
exactly where the pain is. So if you go through each of these, and I get 5 12th grade health class students line up, and number 1 does the specifics, number 2 does the treatment, number 3, and they come up with a full scale injury or pain, because the end is severity on a scale of 1 to 10, which your
Right.
doctor is going to ask anyways. They're going to make it so much better than saying, going into the hospital or doctor and saying, my back is killing me.
Right.
Right, because this is what they say. So the fun thing I did, the first time I ever did this was 12th grade health class. The first thing the kid said was, specifics. What's the specific location of pain and what were you doing before it started? And he said, my penis hurts.
Okay.
And I said, all right. And the teacher said, you asked for it. And then each one had to go across the room and finish it up. So I said, all right, I asked for it. So it's a fun thing to do, and it's better with adults.
Right.
But they do come out with it. And then
Yeah, because that's a little awkward with
it's very
a high
awkward. He
school
was funny.
kid.
Right, exactly. But I never did it before. So that was my lesson. That's my story. And then, but then at the end we say, well, isn't that better than going in and saying, it hurts.
Right, yeah, exactly.
By being able to say, of course, the rest of it, what were you doing before, and how do you make it feel better? That got a little raunchy, but it was a fun.
So how did you
experience.
get involved in this? When you were, and I'm going to give you a Norman question.
Okay.
And hopefully Norman's watching tonight.
Oh, I hope so.
I'm going to give you a Norman question. Right? When you were a kid on the playground, were your hopes and dreams of becoming a patient advocate?
No.
Okay.
My hopes and dreams were to, I had no hopes and dreams. I wanted to just be a good person and figure it out as I went. And I worked for 20 years actually in the post office.
Okay.
And I resigned from the post office to do this full time. And many of my stories come from how people don't understand postal lingo.
Right.
And you don't understand medical lingo. So I love asking doctors who knows the difference between certified mail and registered mail, and they never do. So why should I understand what you're talking about?
So you were a postal worker.
I was a postal worker for 20 years, yeah. Loved it, loved my customers. I was inside. I did on-the-job training, and I actually did paperwork, forms, a booklet to help people understand the post office terms. So I was doing this very young, very early. But what happened is, a lot of people think that my son needed surgery. My youngest son needed surgery, and I needed to find out something about the doctor, and the doctors. And because there was nothing out there about doctors, I started lobbying New York State for physician profiles to get on the internet information about our doctor's background.
Right.
While I was doing that, I was meeting people who had these horror stories. Before that, and the reason it was very important for me to find out about my son's surgeon is because a couple of years earlier, I had a son that died from a tonsillectomy.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So he bled to death for a week. I kept going
from a tonsillectomy, which is a very common.
It's very common. It's much less common now.
Right.
But bleeding is not that uncommon. But I didn't know that at the time, and I kept going back to doctors.
I'm sorry.
Sorry for your Thank you. I went back to doctors and hospitals 5 different times, and everyone said, "Don't worry, he's fine." And the 8th day, he died from blood loss, and he was full of infection, which I didn't know about. So it became very important to me to become my children's advocate. And then I had another child who was born perfectly healthy, and my youngest son was born severely premature. Spent 5 months in neonatal ICU, and he is perfectly healthy, 25-year-old now.
Thank God.
Thank God. And so I like to say I saw the worst of healthcare, and I saw the best. And I saw, by sitting with nurses for hours and hours in neonatal, watching them turn from angry, frustrated, loving, caring. I got to see the different people in the nursing care and medical care, and realize that we just need to be more involved as patients and our family members. And as I heard the stories while I was looking for New York State profiles, physician profiles, I would go out and speak to groups of people, and this is in the late 90s, and say, what do you know about your doctor? And if you don't know, then how do we fix this? And we need to get physician profiles in New York State. And people would tell me stories. I would tell them my story, they would tell their story, and I realized that these stories were not being heard. When something goes wrong, hospital personnel do what's called a root cause analysis. They check on what happened, they study it, they research it, and then they try to fix it. Usually, I'm not saying they all do.
Right.
But they're not interviewing the patient and family. So what could I have done different? Nobody cared about a 3-year-old dying from a tonsillectomy. Nobody cared. Nobody was going to learn. Nobody talked about it. How could that be? So I was going to make a point. I started a support group, and then I got involved. I showed up in Chicago at the National Patient Safety Foundation, and they asked me to be on their board and help. I led their patient and family council for 4 years. And in 2005, I became a board member of what's called the Joint Commission, which accredit 21,000 healthcare organizations around the country.
Right, the Joint Commission on Accreditation for hospital.
Yes.
Yeah, very early in my career, I worked for a public accounting firm, and we had a healthcare division. I worked in a healthcare division. And we used to do audits of hospitals, and that was one of the JC,
JACO, it used to be called.
Right,
it's not that anymore.
JACO, that was the big inspection, was JACO coming in.
Right.
So when we were there, when the JACO inspection was going on, that was a big deal for each hospital.
And I've been on their board since 2005. So for 13 years, I've been learning about patient safety from this national level of what can happen, what can go wrong, how things can be fixed.
So you hear you hear all the horror stories, or a lot of the horror stories of what's going on.
Well, I know of them because of that relationship, but the board is not necessarily. I'm not doing inspections or surveys. They're called surveys. I'm not out there on the field, but I do have access to their literature and information and keep up with their studies.
Now, you brought up a very good point a few minutes ago, right, where you said you wanted to get information about this doctor because that's something we don't do. We may, believe it or not, and we all know it, right? We'll get references for our mechanic. We'll get references for somebody coming into our house to fix our plumbing. We'll get references for all of those different things. But how often does somebody ask for references for a doctor? Very rarely, right?
Right.
And you know what? You have good doctors and you have bad doctors. You have doctors that know what they're doing with certain things, and they all have specialties. Well, some people are not as good at the specialties as other doctors are, right? So, how do you go about and find out if a doctor is any good?
Well, keep in mind first that even the best doctors make mistakes. When bad things happen, even to the best driver can get
It's very hard, right? Because
it's very hard.
Sometimes they don't have a control over what happens.
Exactly, and you want to know what it is that you want in your doctor. Some people want somebody that's been a doctor for 40, 50 years, and he's been around forever. When my son was born premature, the doctor that was around for 50 years and was ready to retire didn't want a premature child because he said, I don't know what to do with him.
Right.
But the young doctor that was just coming out of residency, finishing up schooling, said, I could take care of him. Right. And I knew that because I watched the residents take care of him. So you have to know what you want. Do you want a better communicator, or do you want somebody that's done the procedure thousands of times, but what are the bad outcomes? How many times has something bad happen? I took care of a young man who had a tonsillectomy, who lived with me and got a tonsillectomy. When I talked to him, I asked him his complication rate. He told me that he's had complications and how he handled it. That was okay. He was honest.
Right.
So it's what do you want in your relationship with your doctor or surgeon, and if you find that they've been around a long time and they're really great doctors because people use them, but they're not listeners, then you might have a problem.
Yeah. Well, is there all doctors are licensed in New York State, right? We'll just say New York State for that. Can we get in touch with the New York State Licensing Board to find out how many complaints, because people will file complaints if there's, how many complaints have been filed against a doctor? Is that possible?
NewYorkDoctorProfile.com.
Okay,
NewYorkDoctorProfile.com is the website that you can put in for a doctor and get information. But it's not always updated. If a doctor lost his license, sometimes they're gone.
Right.
It's self-reporting. It is a tool. It's not a bad thing because it is a tool, but it's not a guarantee.
It's not reliable.
Well, it's a tool, but it's something that you might want to take.
It's partial information.
Right. It's some of the information. Always Google the doctor's name, see if there's been any newspaper reports on them. This NewYorkDoctorProfile.com will tell you if they've done research. Do you want a doctor that's done a ton of research, or do you want somebody who spends time in the office?
Right.
What are you looking for in a doctor?
What are you looking for?
Right.
Eileen, the hour has flown by. Okay, like I told you it was going to.
Yeah.
So one more time, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
They could call me at 516-579-4711. Email me at info@pulsecenterforpatientsafety.org. Our website is pulsecenterforpatientsafety.org. And patientsafetyevent.org is where you can register for and get tickets for our comedy show.
All right, comedy show September.
No, music show.
Our music show,
At the
Jazz and Blues, September 23rd. Unfortunately, I'm going to be away. My aunt and uncle's 60th wedding anniversary.
That's
so,
nice.
I'm going to be away for that. So, unfortunately, I won't be able to come to it. I'm disappointed, but next one. I'll come to the next one. So thank you again, Eileen. I really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Thanks for doing this. This is great.
Oh, absolutely. It was our pleasure. And like I said, next time Norm will be here and we'll have a lot more fun.
Great.
All right?
Thank you.
So thank you for being on the show. All right, everybody. Great show tonight. Next week, we got actually a couple of things coming up. In the next couple of weeks, there are going to be a couple of big announcements. So don't forget to tune in. Hopefully Norm will be back next week. We're keeping our fingers crossed. Everything looks like that's the path that we're on. So I'm pretty excited about that. And thank you for tuning in tonight, and we'll see everybody next week. Have a good week, everybody.
Today's show is brought to you by Friend Entertainment USA, producing the best concerts for charities and corporations for over 30 years. And CBMS Consulting Services, control your business before it controls you. In association with Area 22 Productions, your multimedia streaming network. If you're interested in being a guest on our show, visit our website at www.bphdmm.com for more information.